My name is Derek, and I work as a vibration technician. So basically, I listen to things that aren't supposed to move, like buildings, floors, foundations, buried structures. Everything vibrates, even when it shouldn't. My job is to read those patterns, the tiny tremors and shifts, and report what they mean. Most days it's routine, nothing but noise. But when the readings change, when a vibration doesn't match anything mechanical or seismic, that's when my work matters. Because vibrations don't lie. They always come from something. And sometimes, they come from somewhere they shouldn't. Last year, the university reopened an old subterranean research wing, 2 floors below ground level. It had been shut down for almost a decade due to budget cuts. They installed new equipment, rewired everything, and hired a small team to bring the place back to life. That team was just 3 people: me, Lucas, and Renee. We worked the late shift, partly because the university didn't want to waste daytime lab rotation, and partly because vibrations at night were easier to analyze. The building above us stayed quiet after 10 p.m. Most nights were uneventful. Data logging, calibrations, coffee, more calibrations. But 2 weeks after reopening, something started happening underground. Something none of us could explain. It was around 12:30 a.m. when I first noticed the lights flicker. Not a typical electrical flicker, more like a brief tremor running through the entire fixture. Renee looked up first. "You felt that?" Before I could answer, the lights trembled again. Not blinking, trembling, like a tiny vibration moving through the bulbs. I checked the power readout. Stable. Voltage, normal. Frequency, 60 Hz sharp. "Probably the HVAC kicking in," Lucas said. He was the skeptic of the group, the kind who needed to see numbers before reacting to anything. So I pulled up the vibration logger. If anything had shaken the lab, ventilation, pumps, building foundation settling, it would appear there. But the graph was flat, perfectly flat. No vibration, no spike, no anomalous reading, nothing. The next night, the phenomenon returned. A slow, almost organic pulse running through the lights, as if something below us was pushing air upward in waves. This time, I aimed our acoustic sensors at the floor. Low-frequency readings usually create a thick band on the spectrogram, a clear signature of vibration. Instead, the screen showed events with no shape at all. Blank impressions, like something was triggering the sensors, but leaving no frequency behind. "Can't be interference," I muttered. The equipment was brand new, top of the line. Lucas leaned over my shoulder. "How can you have an event with no frequency?" "You can't," I said. "Physically impossible." The lights trembled again, this time a little stronger. A few weeks later, we started noticing a pattern. The lights vibrated exactly at 03:12 a.m. I recorded the exact timestamp. So did Lucas. So did Renee. 3 independent logs. Same phenomenon. At 03:12, the lights shook harder than usual, as if something far below us had produced a heavy thump. But again, no reading. The instruments reacted. By not reacting. "Maybe the sensors are picking up the wrong reference," Lucas suggested. "No," I said. "They're picking up nothing. That's the problem." Renee pointed out something new. The temperature on the floor rose by half a degree right before the lights shook. That shouldn't happen. Concrete doesn't warm in perfect circles. Heat spreads randomly. Unless the source is alive and moving. A chill crawling up my spine. Something was off. Very off. I decided to dig into the building archives. Old maintenance logs, old structural maps, renovation notes. That's when something strange jumped out. The structural plan from 1989 showed a chamber directly beneath our lab, a small technical room. But the newer plans, the ones from after the shutdown, completely removed it. No mention of demolition. No record of access closure. Just gone. I brought it to Lucas. He frowned at the old diagram. What was this room for? Label says equipment storage, I answered. But there's no access on the current blueprint. They sealed it off, or pretended it never existed. Renee asked the question none of us wanted. And the vibrations are coming from that room, aren't they? We exchanged a look none of us wanted to interpret. People don't hide empty rooms. They hide whatever was locked inside them. At 0312, we were ready. Sensors primed, lights dimmed, everything recording. When the pulse came, it was sharper, almost like a knock, but stretched out, as if the building were breathing in and exhaling. I swear the floor shifted, just a millimeter, but enough for my knees to feel it. Renee gasped. You felt that? Tell me you felt that. Lucas didn't say anything. He just stared at the concrete beneath our feet. His usual calm was gone, replaced by something between disbelief and fear. I checked the logs. Again, 0 amplitude, 0 frequency, 0 data. Impossible. Something shook us physically, without existing on any graph. Only one piece of equipment showed anything unusual: the thermal sensor. A circular hotspot had appeared on the floor. Radius, 40 centimeters. Temperature, 2°C above ambient, increasing slowly, right above the missing room. The following night, none of us wanted to come back. We came anyway. We're trained to troubleshoot problems, not run from them. So, at 0312, all 3 of us stood in a tight circle, watching the floor. The pulse came, stronger and heavier. The lights shook violently, and one of the fixtures rattled hard enough to clang against its mount. Then something happened that made every hair on my body stand up. The floor rose, just a fraction of an inch. But it rose. Renee staggered backward. Lucas cursed under his breath. The pulse continued for maybe 5 seconds, and then it stopped. Everything went still. No sound, no movement, just silence. A silence so thick it felt like pressure in the ears. I checked the instruments. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But the thermal sensor showed something worse. The hotspot was now twice the diameter, and it was rising through the slab at a measurable rate, as if a massive heat source was getting closer to the surface. We should have reported it, shut everything down, evacuated the wing, but curiosity, or denial, kept us there. We thought maybe it was geological, or mechanical, or a leftover system from the closed room coming online. We told ourselves anything that wasn't the truth. So, we stayed. At 0312, the lights didn't tremble. They exploded into full brightness, blinding white, then dimmed to a faint glow, then bright again, then a pulse, a giant pulse. After that, the ground shook. Not like an earthquake. Earthquakes come from the sides, but this was vertical. It was a force pushing upward. Then, the floor rose again, higher this time, and a visible dome forming in the concrete, maybe 2 inches high, or maybe more. Cracks shot across the slab, thin and branching like spider webs. Renee screamed. Lucas grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. I should have run too, but I froze. Because for the first time, I heard something. Something was pushing against the underside of the lab. The dome flexed again and concrete strained. Tiny dust fell from the ceiling. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. Instant silence. The dome settled. The cracks stopped spreading. The lights returned to normal brightness and stayed still. It was as if whatever was underneath had changed its mind, or simply finished testing the barrier. Security escorted us out. We told them it was a mechanical fault, a pressure fluctuation, some nonsense none of us believed. The lab was sealed again, pending structural evaluation. I don't know what they found. They never let us back in. 2 days later, the entire subterranean wing was closed indefinitely. But here's the part that won't leave my head. When we left that night, I checked the thermal imaging once more. Right before the system shut down, right before the logs were wiped, I saw one last reading. A perfectly circular hot zone the size of a room, centered exactly beneath the missing chamber from the old blueprint. Temperature rising, slowly, consistently. Whatever was there, whatever pushed upward hard enough to lift concrete. It didn't go back down. It stayed, right under the slab. Right under the lab, they sealed again. And if you ask me whether it's still there now, I can only say this. Heat doesn't rise through solid stone in a perfect circle, unless something alive is down there, and living things don't stay quiet forever. Eventually they wake up, and they're always hungry for something. My name is Daniel Hale, and 5 months ago I took a job most people would never consider. Winter personnel at Polaris Station, a privately funded research outpost buried deep in the Arctic. They told me it was a security and monitoring assignment. Nothing too intense, mostly watching equipment and checking gauges. Simple work, good pay, isolation included. But no one mentioned the creature. They called it Specimen B-17. But specimen is a word you use for a frog in a jar. B-17 was something else entirely. I arrived at Polaris in early January, flown in on a cargo helicopter that battled the wind like a paper toy. The base looked like a cluster of metal boxes dropped in the middle of a world made of white and silence. Every breath I took felt like it froze halfway down my lungs. Inside, the station was cramped, loud with machinery, and full of people who spoke a little too quietly, as if they didn't want to be overheard by the ice outside, or by whatever was beneath it. My first night while they were assigning bunks, I heard it. A low, distant groan, long, heavy, like metal bending under extreme pressure. Except it wasn't metal. It had rhythm, almost a resonance. The others barely reacted. One of the engineers, a guy named Ross, noticed my confusion and said, "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." He didn't explain, and no one else volunteered anything either. The silence around that sound was more unsettling than the sound itself. It took 3 days before I saw the hangar. They had assigned me to assist with containment panel checks, basic visual inspections of structural integrity. The supervisor handed me a key card and pointed toward a passage at the far end of the station. "Don't touch anything unless you're told," she said. "Just walk, look, record." I followed a narrow corridor lined with frost-covered pipes until I reached a pair of industrial steel doors bolted into the ice itself. A keypad blinked red in the dim light. I swiped my card. The doors slid open with a shudder, and then I saw it. The hangar was the size of a stadium, carved straight into the glacier. Massive support beams arched overhead, coated with frost. Floodlights illuminated a figure at the far end of the chamber, hunched, chained, and colossal. At first, my brain didn't know how to interpret what I was seeing. It was gigantic, a white furred body with long, muscular arms and thick legs built for power. It reminded me of a primate, something like a King Kong adapted to the ice, but much larger than anything that should exist. And when those eyes turned toward me, my breath stalled without warning, because there was something familiar in them, something I hadn't seen in years. And as strange as it sounds, I knew that expression. When I was younger, I adopted a dog from a shelter, a skinny, shaking thing with wide, terrified eyes. Eyes that didn't know whether to trust me or run. Eyes that carried every bad thing that had ever happened to him. That look stayed with me my whole life. And now, staring at this enormous creature in the cold, I saw the same look again. And I knew that it was scared, truly scared. I stood frozen until Ross finally found me and shoved the door shut. "Don't look at him that long," he murmured. "Trust me." "Why?" He walked away without answering. 2 weeks later, everything changed. The temperature had dropped to levels the station wasn't built for. Systems froze, alarms buzzed, half the electrical grid flickered. I was assigned to help in the containment corridor again. Some pressure valves were icing over faster than the heaters could manage. Inside the hangar, the creature sat slumped, shivering with every breath. Each tremor echoed through the floor. The temperature displays were blinking red. A supervisor yelled from across the catwalk, "Valve 9! It's stuck! Someone get it open!" I was closest. I moved toward the massive pipe near the containment wall. Frost covered everything, including the pressure wheel. If the valve stayed locked, steam would build inside the wall and rupture the interior pipes. And if the wall ruptured, containment would fail. I hit the wheel with my palm. Nothing. I tried again. Nothing. My hands were shaking from the cold, slipping on the metal. Somewhere behind me, I heard B-17 groan. A long, pained sound that vibrated through my bones. The pressure gauge was climbing fast. If it hit critical, the wall might burst from the inside. I grabbed a nearby heater duct, pointed it at the wheel, and defrosted just enough ice to free the mechanism. Then I forced the valve open. The moment I did, a blast of scalding vapor hissed upward, releasing trapped pressure, and everything stopped. The creature, who had been slumped forward in misery, lifted its head. Slowly, carefully, like the air had suddenly become breathable. Its eyes opened wider, glowing faintly. It inhaled. The tremor in its chest eased. It looked toward the valve I had just opened. Then it looked at me. Not with gratitude. Animals don't do gratitude. With recognition. The kind you see when a wounded animal realizes who removed the thorn. A supervisor shouted, "Don't get too close." But it was too late. The creature had already connected me to the moment its pain eased. That was the beginning of the end. That night, the temperature dropped even further. Steel contracted. Ice expanded. The entire station groaned like a dying ship. I was in the cafeteria when the first alarm went off, a warning tone I hadn't heard before. Emergency lights flashed down the hall. People ran. Someone yelled, "Containment breach," and everyone dropped their trays. The floor shook, lightly at first, then violently. It felt like something enormous was shifting beneath the glacier. We sprinted toward evacuation points, but a roar, a real roar, shook the station so hard that ceiling frost fell like snow. I turned the corner just in time to see the hangar doors bend outward, metal warping like foil. Another roar, a crash. Sparks exploded across the hallway, then the doors tore open. The creature forced its way out, breaking chains thicker than my waist, smashing through beams that held up the entire station. People screamed. Some tried to run. Others slipped on the ice-covered floor. B-17 did not hunt them. It did not chase. It panicked. It swung its arms in blind fear, sending equipment and bodies flying like fragile toys. Not out of cruelty, but out of terror. One of the scientists fired a flare gun, which only made the creature rear back and strike. The scientist disappeared under a collapsing walkway. Another crew member tried to activate a door lock. The creature flung him across the bay with a single swipe. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, mind blank. The ice cracked under the creature's feet with every step. The creature's head snapped toward me. It stopped. Everything else, screaming, metal breaking, alarms, blurred into silence. It stepped closer, just one massive footfall at a time. I braced for the end, but instead of killing me, it paused in front of me, lowering itself slightly, as if trying to see me better. Its breathing settled, steady, deep, almost calm. It remembered. It remembered the pressure valve. It remembered the moment the pain stopped. And in that instant, I understood. I was not danger. A beam collapsed nearby, startling it. B-17 jerked back, turned, and fled toward the outer airlock. With one strike, it shattered the structure and escaped into the blizzard. And then it was gone, leaving only echoes, broken steel, and the dead behind. It took nearly 3 days for rescue teams to find me. I'd survived by chance, stuck behind a collapsed section of corridor, barely warm enough to avoid hypothermia. The station was destroyed. Everyone else was dead. The officials called it a structural failure. They never mentioned the creature in their reports. Probably never will. But sometimes when I think back to that moment in the containment hall, when B-17 first realized its pain had stopped, I wonder if it had ever felt anything close to relief before. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the wind is still, I swear I hear something far off in the Arctic distance. A low, deep breath. As if the creature is still out there, wandering the ice, free at last, and remembering me. My name is Andrew, and everything started 5 years ago. Back then, I thought I was witnessing the beginning of something incredible, a discovery big enough to change what we know about life beneath the earth. But it didn't become a breakthrough. It didn't lead to papers, conferences, or recognition. It became a mistake. Just another failed experiment that ends up buried in internal reports, filed away under some quiet project code, collecting dust in the university archives. Most people won't remember it happened. Most people won't remember me. But I remember. I remember every second of my life, because I've been awake for all of them. It started with an accident at work. I was analyzing deep core samples, the kind drilled from miles below the surface, layers where nothing alive should exist. One chunk looked different from anything I'd seen before. Dark, oddly smooth, almost metallic, but with a texture that changed under the light. It didn't fit any mineral profile. We put it inside a micro-pressure chamber, just like protocol says. When I increased the pressure, the chamber cracked with a sharp pop. A tiny burst of particles hit my cheek and arm, warm, almost sticky, but barely enough to notice. I washed it off, wrote the incident report, and went home. That night, no matter how long I lay there, my mind stayed awake. Not anxious, not restless, just awake. I told myself it was nothing. One weird night. It happens. Except it didn't stop. In the beginning, it didn't feel like a curse. If anything, it felt like I'd unlocked a hidden advantage. I'd go to bed out of habit, close my eyes, wait, and stay perfectly alert. No fatigue, no frustration, just quiet awareness. After a few nights, I simply stopped trying. I had energy all the time. I worked twice as fast as I used to. I volunteered for late shifts. I started reading more, learning things I'd always put off, filling my nights with activities I never had time for. And outside of work, I started living. Really living. Friends who barely saw me suddenly had me showing up at midnight asking if they wanted to grab drinks. I went to bars during the week, stayed until closing, laughed, talked, walked home as if sleep didn't exist for me anymore. And for a while it didn't. I'd hike trails before sunrise, clean my apartment at dawn, binge watch entire shows in a single sitting, learn guitar, finish books in one night. People would ask how I managed to work and still have the energy to go out. I'd laugh and say, "I don't sleep." They'd laugh back, thinking it was a joke. Those first months felt like freedom. I didn't realize that what felt like extra hours were actually hours my body needed but would never get again. Little by little, that bright energy started twisting into something else. My thoughts sped up. At first, it was convenient. I could solve problems instantly, pick up small details in conversations, recognize patterns in data without effort. Then the speed became uncomfortable. Conversations felt slow, like people around me were stuck in a different gear. I'd think of entire paragraphs while someone was still finishing a sentence. Sometimes I'd start talking too fast and stumble over my words. Other times I'd go completely quiet, because my brain had already moved 3 steps ahead of my mouth. Time didn't feel normal anymore. Hours slipped by too quickly or too slowly. I'd stay focused for what felt like 10 minutes and look up to see 3 hours had passed. I started writing down my thoughts to keep track of them, but when I read them later, they didn't make sense. The handwriting was frantic, the ideas half-formed, as if my mind was racing faster than my hands could follow. And then the tremors began. Small twitches in my fingers, almost rhythmic. At first, I blamed caffeine, stress, anything except the truth. But after recording them, I realized they followed the exact same frequency as the sample that burst on me. That was the first time I felt real fear, because it was the first time something connected the accident to what was happening to me. The months rolled into a year, then 2, now 5, and in all this time, I haven't slept, not once. The initial energy is gone, the clarity is gone, the fast thinking is gone. What's left is something I don't quite know how to describe, a mind that refuses to shut down, living inside a body that's collapsing from exhaustion it can't feel. I'm 36, but I look at least 70, maybe 90 on a bad day. My skin is loose, my eyes permanently shadowed, my posture bent. My muscles weakened even though I eat well and walk every day. It's as if my body aged and fast forward, trying to compensate for years of rest it never received. But the worst part isn't the physical aging, it's the disconnect. My brain sends commands, but my body reacts late, or hesitates, or misfires. I reach for a glass and knock it over. I stand up and stumble because my legs delay the signal. I turn around and feel my upper body follow a second too late. Sometimes I forget how to start a movement, like tying my shoes or lifting my arm. I speak slowly now, not because I don't know what to say, but because my mouth and mind no longer operate at the same speed. My thoughts still race, but the rest of me is stuck in molasses. Lucid moments come in flashes, short windows where everything feels clear. Then they fade, leaving me in a fog where I can't even trust my own balance. Doctors say my brain patterns match severe sleep deprivation, except I've lived in that state for half a decade. They don't know how I'm still functioning at all. They don't know what the organism was, or what it did to me, or why I lost the ability to transition into sleep. I don't know either. And the truth is, I don't think it meant to hurt me. I don't think it even understood what it was doing. Whatever that substance was, whatever microscopic structure hit my skin, maybe it simply didn't recognize sleep as a biological requirement. Maybe it suppressed something it shouldn't have touched. Some delicate mechanism humans need to shut down, recharge, heal. Maybe it turned off the wrong switch in me. And now I'm stuck like this. I don't work anymore. I barely leave the house. My family calls, but I always find a reason to avoid letting them see me. Most nights I sit in the dark living room, listening to the quiet of a world that gets to rest while I stay awake through every second of it. In the beginning, my condition felt like gaining time. Now it feels like time is taking something from me every day. There is a tiredness beyond physical exhaustion, something deeper, like a weight pressing on who I am rather than on my muscles. I don't feel sleepy, but I feel worn down in ways sleep could never fix, even if I suddenly regained the ability. Sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I still sense faint tremors in my hands. The same rhythm from the beginning. The same pattern from that unknown organism. It's not growing or spreading or killing me. It just took away the one thing a human body cannot live without. I didn't die. I just wore out. And I'm still wearing out. So if you ever work in a lab, if you ever handle something nature buried far beneath the surface, be careful. Sometimes the worst thing isn't a creature that chases you, or a sound in the dark, or something trying to get in. Sometimes the worst thing is what takes something small from you, quietly, invisibly, and never gives it back. Sometimes the worst monsters are the ones you never actually meet.